building a coil vessel. I've done a little research for inspiration for my vessel, and I have a couple of examples. This is a soda-fired Katie Francis piece, and this is a Mesoamerican terracotta historical vessel with some terra sigillata surface design on it. I have chosen an archaic Greek amphora as my inspiration for this piece, and I drew it on a piece of 12-inch drawing paper just to scale it up a little bit. My target height for this piece is about 12 inches, and the width is going to be about a quarter of an inch thick. The clay walls will be about a quarter of an inch thick. I'm going to measure the base, and it looks to me to be about 3 inches wide in my drawing. So I want to start with a piece of clay, the base of my piece. I'm going to start with a piece of clay that is about 3 inches wide. So you'll notice I have extruded coils. They're about a half an inch thick. I have a banding wheel and a dry wear board. I also have my ruler nearby and my coils really well wrapped in plastic while they await me. I'm starting with a little ball of clay. I'm going to pat it into a round shape and make sure it's the right amount of clay. So I'm removing a little bit here because the ball of clay that will become the base is only about 3 inches wide, so it's not a ton of clay that I need here. So I'm thinking the ball of clay is about the size of a large lime, and I'm making it really round by compressing it and rolling it in my hands. And then I am going to start to flatten it directly on the board. The board's a porous surface. It's going to release that clay so I can work directly on the board. And then I'm just sort of flattening it from the inside out, compressing it well while trying to keep it really even. So turning it over and compressing it while expanding it to my target width. And then I'll go to the ruler and measure to make sure. So my clay walls, when I build this pot, are going to be about a quarter of an inch thick. So I want the base to be about a quarter of an inch thick. Once I have reached my target width and thickness, I begin to score that pat of clay really well, all the way around with some pretty deep, chaotic, multi-directional scoring. And that scoring is about 1/8 of an inch deep. It's pretty deep. I need to really well join that first coil to the base, so I have to make sure the scoring is really good on both sides. I'm keeping my coils covered while I work, and that way no moisture will evaporate. And then I'm scoring the first coil as well, really well. So as I said, I used fresh plastic clay right out of a brand new bag to extrude through the extruder. As you know, the extruder creates coils with a ton of compression, and those extruded coils are about a half an inch thick. And I'm going to join them and pinch them to be about a quarter of an inch thick for my ultimate thickness of my pot. Once I have scored both sides really well, both the coil and the pad, then I place a nice layer of thick slip. So that's slaked bone dry clay of the same clay that I'm using to build, so the same clay body. And then once I have put on a nice thick layer of slip, I'll place the coil on the base and begin to join it really well. I'm supporting one side and pushing the clay from the coil into the base. So I'm joining down by supporting the inside and pushing the clay on the outside down, and then supporting the outside and pushing the clay on the inside down. Once I've got that really well joined, then I'll pinch it through a little bit to refine the shape and thin the coil out a little bit, and then I will pick up another coil out of my bag here and wrap that remaining coils really well, and then place that second coil directly on top of the first one. So you will notice that with the second coil, I'm not slipping and scoring, and there's a couple of reasons for that, and there's only really this instance where it's okay. So I've placed the coil right on top, I'm supporting the inside, and I'm joining down with my thumb on the outside. it's only compression when you're supporting both sides. So it's strengthening the clay, even though it's thinning it, and it's really unifying that first coil to the second one. So the reason we don't have to slip and score this time, even though slipping and scoring is pretty much a rule in ceramics, is because we are joining fresh clay to fresh clay, and that first coil is always slipped and scored really well. So this is clay right out of the bag. The particles are going to shrink back in the same direction that they were compressed, and we can get away with not slipping and scoring here. Also, when you have really fresh clay that you're building with and onto, we don't want to add a lot of additional moisture. So slip in particular between each layer would actually be detrimental to the strength of the piece as it is growing taller. So we don't want to, in hand building, we don't really use a lot of additional moisture. So here for this particular coil pot, we are not slipping and scoring between subsequent coils. The first coil of the day always must be slipped and scored to the whatever it was there before, whether it's half the project that you completed yesterday or that first pad of clay. But subsequent coils with fresh clay from the same clay you extruded today onto a coil that was already slipped and scored in the first place do not need additional slipping and scoring. So you can see here I'm doing the same thing with the third coil. I'm joining it by joining the top coil to the bottom, supporting the inside and pulling a little clay down from one layer to the next. And then once that coil is joined, I pinch through to refine the shape. So now I am going to my little template here, and my template will tell me if the profile is staying on track. So I'm going to use that template and spin the pot to make sure that I'm staying on track here. And then I can add a subsequent coil. I always like to keep the coils a little narrow. It's always easier to refine and expand the form through pinching it open a little bit more than it is to make it more narrow. So you'll notice I'm sort of putting one coil directly on top of the other and expanding it gradually by pinching it open a little bit. And then periodically checking my drawing for height and width, as well as my template for that exterior profile to make sure I'm staying on track. And here's just the side view of supporting one side and joining down with the other side, and then subsequently pinching through. At first, it's going to seem a little messy. Later on, when we have a little height here, we can use our rigid rubber rib or our metal rib to scrape the surface a little bit smoother. And then we can do quite a bit of smoothing once the piece is approaching leather hard. So here again, checking the template after each coil and making any minor adjustment that needs to happen as I'm building, rather than trying to make big changes later. It's always the best way to go. So with this next coil, I want to expand a little bit more. Until now, I was placing coil upon coil and then expanding through pinching it open a little bit, but now I want to expand it a little bit more dramatically. So I'm taking this coil, it's just a little bit longer, and I'm placing it ever so slightly on the outside ridge of that edge there. So if you look down inside the pot, you see that you can see a little bit of that interior edge, so we know that that coil is a little bit wider, and I'd spend a fair amount of time making sure it's perfect. So replacing it, shortening it a tiny bit there, and making sure it is a little bit of that interior seam, making sure it's really good. All of these like extra steps really make a difference in having a strong, symmetrical, and beautiful pot. So here I am joining down again, supporting the outside while joining the inside, and then doing the same on the outside. Incidentally, I don't slip and score the seam. We compress it really well together. We just want to make sure when we add each subsequent coil that we offset that seam a little bit so not all the seams are lined up in the same place. And that will keep the pot from sort of unzipping, I guess you could say. Added the coil, supported the inside and the outside, and then compressed and pinched through to make sure that it is really even and well compressed. The last thing we're going to do is smooth both the inside and the outside. So again, supporting the outside while smoothing the inside, just some gentle scraping with any rib, and then supporting the inside while scraping the outside. This will be the end of my work session today. I want to let this pot firm up a little bit, draped under one layer of plastic for 6 or 8 hours, or maybe even overnight, and then it will be firmed up enough to accept additional weight of coils at my next work session, which I will continue in the next video.